Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Trinity, and I'm going to be presenting our speaker for tonight. So, our speaker is Dr. Emma Simmons, is a health science clinical professor, senior associate dean of student affairs, and the Salma Hayter Endowed Chair of the Thomas Hayter Program at the UC Riverside School of Medicine. In addition, she practices medicine at the Access Clinic at Riverside University Health System Medical Center. As Senior Associate Dean, Dr. Simmons provides leadership for the medical school's initiatives in student recruitment, admissions, financial aid, academic enrichment, pathway programs, student well-being, and career counseling. Dr. Simmons came to UC Riverside in 2011 from the Albert Medical School at Brown University, where she has been Assistant Dean for Minority Medical Affairs and an Assistant Professor in the Department of Family Medicine. She also served as the Assistant Director of the Health Disparities Research at Memorial Hospital in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, where she was also a staff physician. After earning her BS in chemistry from Tuvalu College, she went on to earn her MD and MPH degrees at Brown University. She completed her residency in family medicine at the Memorial Hospital of Rhode Island. Dr. Simmons is a member of the American Academy of Family Practitioners, and Dr. Simmons has conducted research on HIV and AIDS, particularly its impact on minority communities. Her work includes a study of routine HIV testing and primary care practices and participation in the Brown Initiative in HIV and AIDS clinical research for minority communities. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Trinity and Jovan, for inviting me to talk to students tonight. So as I was telling your organizers, I really need this to be interactive. It becomes very boring when someone is just sitting there talking to you and you don't process it. I need this to be more active. So lots of questions are the way to go. But I entitled my presentation Mission Medical School, because that's your mission, is to get to medical school, right? I hope we're all on the same page with everybody. I can't talk about nursing school or PA school, but a lot of the same principles do apply. So, but I'm specifically talking about medical school and how to be a competitive applicant and what you need to do to try your best to get into medical school. All right. So when you are applying to medical school, you've done your 4 years of 3 years or 4 years of undergraduate education. You've done your 12 years of K through 12. You've done really well in all of those. And then you have to stand out above everybody else who's applying for medical school. So how do you distinguish yourself to this panel of physicians or whoever is on this admissions committee to show that you are the right person for their school? What is it that you're going to do to distinguish yourself? So I want to start off by asking you to be the admissions committee. And I've given you 3 applicants who are applying to medical school. Jamal has a good GPA of 3.6, and this is his total GPA, not his BCPM, but his BCPM or biology, chemistry, physics, and math GPA was about 3.5, but I'm giving you just the cumulative GPA. His MCAT was 520. He had 6 discrete experiences, and his total hours of service for his whole application was 500 hours. Kale, on the other hand, had a cumulative GPA of 3.4, MCAT 514, 3 total experiences, 1,100 hours total. Nina, as you can see, her characteristics, 3.8, MCAT of 502, 11 different experiences, and 600 total hours. So who would you accept to your medical school? You only have 1 seat. You have 1 seat, and these are 3 applicants. Who are you going to give that seat to, committee? Put your names in the chat. I wish I could do the poll, but I don't think I can, so we'll just do the chat. Interesting. Interesting. It looks to me like KO is in the lead. Am I the only one who thinks who? It looks like KO.
Yeah, Kale is about I would say probably 70%,
Yeah.
and then Jamal and Nina's last.
Okay.
And somebody said it is hard, and yes, it is hard.
It's very hard. And this is what we do. So I want someone, can someone tell me why they would choose KO? KO had the most points. Can someone briefly tell me why you chose KO over Jamal and Nina? They're all good, but why did you choose one over the other? And someone who chose Nina, tell me why you chose Nina. Put the name and why, and then for Jamal and why. Now, no one can speak out loud, correct?
Right, that's true. Yes.
Okay. So just in your chat, if you can briefly tell me why. Total hours is Oscar. You said total hours is the total hours for KO. That's why you pick KO over everyone else. Because KO had 1,100 hours.
Yeah, some people are saying Cal because of his hours.
Okay.
Some other people are saying Nina.
Okay. And those who were on Team Nina, okay, Team Jamal said because of his MCAT. That's probably the best thing to look at. So you looked at Jamal's MCAT. Okay. What about Team Nina? Who wants to make the case for Nina? She had a high GPA and diverse experiences. Okay. I hear several people said she had a high GPA and diverse experiences. So you like the GPA and the various experiences. Okay. Nina, because of how well-rounded she is, her GPA speak to her great work ethic, loves the diversity in her experiences as well. Great. Excellent. Excellent. So thank you all for opining on this. It's really hard. And what I would say is we really don't have enough information to say, right? Because I didn't tell you what the experiences was. I told you a little bit about the cumulative GPA and a little bit about the science GPA. I didn't tell you how many times they took the MCAT. You know, I didn't tell you a lot. So let's talk a little bit more about, you know, what else matters. The stories matter. The who you are matters very much, especially for a school like UCR School of Medicine, because we do what's called holistic review, which means although some of the students had great MCATs, some of them had great GPAs, some of them had great experiences, we try to look at it all in total, not just one thing by itself, because one thing doesn't make, none of us are singularly focused, and none of us are just one person, one dimensional. We're all three-dimensional. So the stories of who you are and how you got to where you are really, really matter a lot. And you should really try to emphasize that as much as possible. Your background. Where did you come from? What have you overcome? What is it about you that makes you unique and different to help someone else? Your work experience. You know, Nina had a lot of work experiences, but Jamal didn't. Why did Jamal not have a lot of work experiences? Maybe he didn't have a lot of work experiences in the clinical setting because he was working at McDonald's to make a living for his family. The distance travel. If you can overcome a challenge, you are very attractive to medical schools, because what do doctors do each and every day? They have to push through. They have to be resilient. They have to not give up when the going gets tough. They have to really show that they are in it to win it. And your distance travel show that you can, you know, when you fall, you get right back up. And that's really important. Being a doctor and by reference, being a medical student means that you are willing to change. You're willing to improve, constant improvement. I've been a physician for 30 years. I still have to study all the time. We still have to take tests all the time. Continuous medical improvement, continuous medical education. We constantly have to do that. So if you can't get into that mode of constantly trying to improve, then you're in the wrong field when you go into the healthcare field, because things change all the time. Volunteer experience, different than work experience. Work experience, you get paid for. Volunteer experience, you do it out of the goodness of your heart, or you do it for something for you to get better, or because you want to be altruistic. So volunteer experience is very important, because we need to know that you can be around blood, gut, bad spells, tears, sadness, death. We need to know that you can handle that, because this is something that you will be dealing with for the rest of your life. Letters of recommendation really, really matter. So you get a certain number of letter recommendations, typically up to about 5. You want to make sure that those letters count. It is important who you get them from. It is important how you go about getting them. And it is important the content of those letters, because it makes a big difference. It tells the story of who you are, and who you are tells us how you will fit in the schools. You have 155 medical schools in the country. You want to try to fit the medical school that best fit, helps you to grow and to not only as a physician, but as a person, because you're still also learning about your professional identity as well as your personal identity. Any questions about anything that I've said there? No? All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Jamal. Jamal was unhoused for 2 years. He had to work at McDonald's to help support his family, because his mother unfortunately was killed in a motor vehicular accident when he was 14 years old. So he had to take care of his younger siblings, and it became so hard at one time that he had to drop out of college for 3 years. He was not doing well, and then he had to, because he was working so many hours, he had to do shifts in order to help take care of his siblings, and he had to drop out of college to help take care of them. He only took the MCAT once. That's Jamal. Does it change your mind about him now? Does that matter to anyone else for Jamal? If you go back and look at his application, does that change your mind about would you pick him over the others? Yeah. So stories matter, right? It makes a difference. And I see a lot of people say it changes. Now, let's go on to, if I can go forward with my, oops. Let's go on now to Kale. Kale comes from Advantage. Both of his parents are doctors. His grandparent, his aunt, his cousins, siblings, all doctors. They know they're going to be doctors in this family, because that's what they do. They go to medical school. They are doctors. He's the head of his fraternity. He has this frat. He's in it. He's living large.
I would
Kale,
take him because he probably could throw good parties.
Yep, he could throw real good parties because he had the money and he had the dough to do so, and the partnerships. He did unfortunately have a DUI. We think it's expunged from his record, but we know he did have a DUI. He has lots of international experience. He was able to go overseas, and he was able to, go to different countries and spend time there. And he has lots of shadowing also inside the country. Now, I'll go back to KO so you can remember KO, if I can get back there. Does that change your idea about KO? Those of you who said you really liked KO, would you still accept KO as your one slot that you have for medical school? So some people are giving slot up, but you said he had 1,100 hours. He had a 514. Someone said he had a red flag. What's the red flag? What was the red flag for KO? The DUI, but it was expunged from his record. Right? Is that still, would that still matter to you? He was 17 years old. He was in a frat. He had a DUI. So you wouldn't want your doctor to have a DUI. Okay.
Then you might not have a lot of doctors.
Exactly. That's for sure. That's for sure. So William says he still would accept him. And with his privileges, he'll definitely fit in. He'll make more mistakes. He's fine, but he still likes Jamal better. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, lots of doctors do have DUIs. Lots of medical schools students have DUIs, but we try to, so Jamal is still in the front for some of you all. And it seems like the doctors might be families. He might have been inclined just because of that rather than the actual passion. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stories matter, right? And how would you know that if they weren't able to say that if I hadn't told you? All right, can we go on to Nina? So you guys would make really good admissions officers. Now let's look at Nina. Nina also had to work to support her family. She took the MCAT 3 different times. Oops, that's a typo. One was 489, one was 499, one was 500, not 299. 299 is not possible. She did all of her volunteering in organizations to support the unhoused because she was real interested in it, because at some point she and her family were also unhoused. She tried her best to get a position shadowing, much like you all. She was knocking on doors, writing letters to doctors, and because she didn't have any connections, she was unable to get a position to shadow the doctors, clinical doctors. But she did take care of a neighbor. She had a neighbor who had a stroke, and she took care of him, and she, helped the neighbor through the difficulty. She fed them, she helped to bathe them, she helped to help them walk and to do whatever the doctors told them that she could do with the physical therapy. And she had to take a bus 2 hours a day to get to school. She really had a lot on her plate. So let's go back and look at Nina. Does that change your mind about Nina? So I can see some of the things that says Nina has, the bus ride shows determination. It makes her more competitive. She's consistent. A little. Okay. A lot of disadvantages. You maintain a high GPA. Persistent. You would still go with Jamal. What about Nina's MCAT scores? What do you think about her MCAT scores? Showed an upward trend. So you know about upward trends. Taking MCAT shows dedication, somewhat low. Shows that she's determined, persistent. Okay, very good. So we do see persistence. Why do you think Nina's MCAT scores were so low? Versus KO's being high. She was balancing a lot. Okay. Why else do you think it was low? Exactly. She couldn't take a prep course. She couldn't take a prep course because she was paying for other things. Lack of educational resources. Yes. So now, you see what we see as admissions officers. And did any of you change your mind? Now I want to get another vote. You only have one vote. You only have one vote. Who would you now pick? Who would you pick now that you know the stories a little bit more? Who is your pick for your medical school? Okay. So you guys didn't give you didn't give KO, who has all that advantage of spotting your medical school. Look at that. So Nina and Jamal will get into your medical school. Very good. But you see how hard it is, right? You see how hard it is to do that, to make a decision, to just pick one student. And obviously, it's not just one student for us. There are, how many medical school applicants were there in the last year's application? Take a guess. How many? 47,000, 6,000, 50,000 plus, 300,000, 20,000, 4,000, 8,000. Whoever put UCI in the chat, I'm very upset with you. I don't want to hear about UCI. We're talking only UCR here. Close to 50,000, 100,000. Yeah. So 60 is, there you go, Jaden. 62,443. 62,443. How many spots do we have in California? How many spots do we have in California for medical schools available? Write it in the chat. 600, 5,000, 1,000, 800, 1,500. I'll stop at the 1,500. That's pretty close. 1,553. So 62,443 applications for 1,553 here in California. California is very competitive. And of that, it's not a lot of seats, right? So you have to really you have to really put yourself out. So if you get nothing from this session today, is that you need to work really hard to get your stories out there, to show who you are, in addition to those metrics. Now, someone said that taking an MCAT multiple times shows resilience. We do want you to take it more than once. The problem is you shouldn't take the MCAT too many times, because if you keep taking it and your scores are low, then it's actually even worse. It's even worse. And there is a limit to how many MCATs you can take. You can only take it 7 times total. So you don't want to take it until you are really, 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 really prepared. Some schools look at the most recent scores. Some schools look at the highest scores. Some schools look at all of those scores combined. So that 489, the 499, and the 500 would bring Nina's total score down even more. So it really matters. I love this, Tyler. Which applicant is interested in practicing in inland Southern California? Tyler, you have the inside scoop on UCR School of Medicine, I see. Yeah, so we also look at that. We also look at your interest in staying here in inland Southern California and practicing here in inland Southern California. So we give additional points to that and to if you are from this area. So that is, we are very intentional about that. So of all those 1,500 spots in California, UCR has 80. We have 80 spots. We get 6,000 to 7,000 applications every year for 80 spots. So what do you do to put yourself at an advantage? At an advantage to UCR? What do you do? My bags are packed to head there from New Jersey. But you have to have ties to inland Southern California. If we only have 80 spots, we can't look at people outside of California unless you can show us early on that you have ties to inland Southern California, because we feel that if you have ties to inland Southern California, you're more likely to stay here. And our mission is to improve the health of inland Southern California. So we want that. Yeah. So your stories matter. You have to tell us that in your story, or we won't know it, or we will just look over your application.
I put the link to UCR School of Medicine, and their 14th word is inland Southern California. So
perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about the stats. And I see some questions there. Do experiences refer to clinical experiences or research experiences? So I was very vague there on Nina's and Kales and Jamals' application, but it does matter. You have experiences both in clinical, research, and or work. You know, you might not have any. So it's very, and when you do the MCAS application, it would be, they would ask you specifically what kind of experiences you are and how many hours. When should you register for the MCAT? Wait till it opens or wait till we are within MCAT target range? So you want to register for the MCAT early on in the, and I that's one of my slides later. But I do want to stop and talk about this right now. You do not want to take the MCAT until you are doing as well as you can, close to a score of at least 500. You definitely want to put your best foot forward. You don't want to just take the MCAT just to test. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you are well prepared, you studied for it, you've practiced, and you've gotten some feedback from your MCAT before you actually go and take it, because the scores will go to the medical schools. How do we know if someone's from inland Southern California? We know because we look specifically for that. That's part of our mission. We look at if you are from either San Bernardino County, Riverside County, or from Imperial County. If you went to high school there, if that's part of your address, if your parents are there, or if you say something about it in your application. Does that answer your question? Okay, and the next question is being a part of extracurriculars recommended?
what extracurricular activities do you recommend?
Oh, what extracurricular activities? So really and truly, and you're not going to like this answer, whatever you're passionate about. So everybody, you know, part of your story means that we see who you are. So if I tell you to do an extracurricular activity, fixing up model cars, and you hate model cars, then don't do that. If I tell, and that's a hobby. If I tell you to do an extracurricular of working with pediatrics patients, and you can't stand working with little kids, you'd rather work with geriatric patients, then don't you do what you feel helps you to understand yourself better and something that makes you excited. So you want to do, there is no one extracurricular that is better than the other. There is no one hobby that is better than the other. There's no one work experience that is better than the other. They all have different pros to them. What we do look for is how much time you spend in that, how much commitment you put in that, if there's leadership or room for growth in it. That's what we look for. We look at your commitment to the extracurriculars that you're doing. We don't like applications that you just go down and check. I went to this, and you spend 10 hours here, 15 hours there. 30. No, we want to see commitment and passion to that. Is research important in an applicant's application? Yes. And different schools value research differently. All medical schools value research. You have three legs. You have clinical, you have research, and you have the educational. So research is important, but some schools are much more interested in research than others. And then some have clinical research, some have bench research or wet lab research. So it's important, but it doesn't, can you make it to medical school without research? You can, but you have to go and look at the MSAR of the schools to see if that school fits you and what other students who have been accepted into that school have done in their research or their lack of research to get into that medical school. If you conduct public health research at a local free clinic in inland Southern California, does that mean that counts toward research? If we don't necessarily want to do wet lab type research? Absolutely, public health research counts as research. Yeah, you just need to explain it to us. That's sure, for sure. Is volunteering at a hospital or clinic, can that be included at a clinic? It is absolutely a clinical experience if you volunteer at a hospital or a clinic. Even if you are not working directly with patients and you're like filing or doing something like that, you can still put it on the clinical and explain it because you're around the people who are sick, or you are there. You're right around sick people. I've been working as a dental assistant for over 2.5 years. Would that be seen as clinical experience to the admissions committee? It would be seen as clinical experience, but truthfully, we wouldn't look at it as positively as if you were a medical assistant, because we're not going into dental school, even though, dental health is medical health. We're looking specifically for medical. We want to make sure that you can look at the gut, or you can look in the eyes, or you can look at the skin, not just in the mouth. A summer research experience definitely counts as research. Absolutely. Can research balance a lower GPA? Unfortunately, not as much as you think it would. We still look at it holistically, but a lower GPA cannot be balanced by much of anything. We want to see an upward trend to the GPA, or we want to see a strong MCAT, but why do we look at GPAs in medical school? Why do we look at GPAs? I want to ask that question because you're the admissions committee. You're still in the admissions committee. Why do we look at GPAs? Because we just want to cut people out of medical school? In your admissions school, in your medical school, why would you look at a GPA? There you go. There you go. You all are 100% right. We want to see that you can handle the rigor, that you can handle the academics, and you want to make sure that you have the baseline knowledge to become a physician to take care of your patients. Now, many students tell me, well, I can do better. I can do better. This GPA and the MCAT does not define who I am. What would you say to that student who says, just give me a chance in your medical school? My GPA is not good and my MCAT is not good, but I can do it. I can handle it. What would you say as the admissions committee representative for your school? Would you say, okay, come on in. I have 62,442 other students who are applying, and I'm going to skip over the line and give you this with a low GPA and a low MCAT, even though the rest of your application looks good. How many of you would accept them, give them your one spot into medical school? Yep, what's going to change? Let's look at your GPA trend. It depends. Is there an upward trend? Too much of a risk? Somebody flat out said no. Maybe consider a postback and apply and prove that you can do it. There you go. And that's what I would say. I would say, yes, Nelson, we do take a holistic approach. We definitely do. But We take a holistic approach for everyone else. We take a holistic approach for everything. And it's a piece of the puzzle. We want to see that you can handle the rigors. It becomes very expensive to go to medical school. And you get into medical school, you have to pay for medical school. Even if you did not make it through medical school, 97% of people do, but if you didn't make it through, you still have to pay for that medical school education. And if you are flipping burgers, it's going to be really hard to pay for a medical school education, right? Because doctors make a lot of money. People who do minimum wage jobs don't make a lot of money. So we want to make sure that you don't have too much debt and you can't yet do the rigorous academics that are required to get through medical school and to get to residency and beyond. Because remember what I said, continuous medical improvement, CMEs, you have to do that the rest of your life. It's not just one time to get in, it's to get through and beyond. All right, so I see, I'm going to go back to the questions in the chat because I'm running behind with that. Would working as a quality improvement manager at a federally qualified health center be seen as a clinical experience? That's interesting. I think that it would probably not be seen as a clinical experience, but it would be clinical-like. You could put it in there and we would look at it positively, but QI manager, you don't really work as much with around the patient so much. How important is shadowing? Let's talk a minute about shadowing. Shadowing, everyone thinks they should have on their application. Shadowing is good, but what's better? What's better is doing something like being a medical assistant, where you actually get to work directly with the patient. Shadowing is more observant, whereas we want you to do something more with actual direct contact with the patient. So shadowing, if you can do it, do it. But if you can go one step beyond, that's even better. What about clinical research coordinator or clinical research associate jobs at a clinical research organization? Absolutely, those are good. How did UCR School of Medicine academically support students who took a couple of gap years and now are starting medical school? We have 3 full-time equivalent learning assistants to help you through medical school for everyone, whether you took a gap year, whether you had some difficulties getting into medical school, whatever. We have 3 full-time people to help you, plus, but 3 who are dedicated just to helping you with your academics, to help you to get through like tutorial support and any kind of support that you need. How does the school view upward growth through a master's program? It depends on what that master's program is and the rigors. We actually look at the classes that you take and the amount of time. It just depends. Does a high graduate GPA help support a lower undergraduate GPA? Again, it depends. And yes, it can, but it depends on what, if you took a graduate in medical education, that not as much as if you took it in something else, or MPH. Biochemistry, yeah. It makes a difference what it was and how long it took you to take it. Sorry. What is the GPA range for medical school admissions? So it depends on the school. I can tell you what the average GPA is for medical schools, and it's 3.74. The average MCAT is 511.9. The average BCPM is 3.67, and non-science is 3.83. But it depends. The range depends on the medical schools. Will working as an anesthesia tech within the OR be sufficient experience, or would I need more medical volunteer hours? Yes, you will need more medical volunteer hours, but the anesthesia tech does help. But we would like to see more hours than that. Does this count as a research experience if a student participates in research as a general research participant in random studies? No, because you are the actual research participant, not because what we want you to learn is the language. As a research participant, they're working on you, not you helping other people, research participants. Does that make sense?
Well, the question is, would you want to go see somebody who's been a patient a lot, who was studied medical education? I think that's the same thing, being a research participant and a research, somebody conducting research.
Right. A research participant is somebody who is part of the study. And so that doesn't count. You can't count that as an experience. How does being a certified phlebotomist look? It looks good. It looks good, but we will want something more than that, but that looks good. Do you guys consider DACA students? Absolutely. We have DACA students already. Yes, they can enroll and they can, absolutely. Would a Master's of Science in Community Medicine strengthen my application? A little bit. Yep, it could. Absolutely. Is scribing at a free clinic count as? Absolutely. It counts as a clinical experience. When thinking about holistic review, each applicant being a sum greater than its individual part. That being said, there are specific parts each school is looking for in prospective students. I've heard of some schools that they highlight 4 key areas: community research, clinical experience, and leadership. Are these similar for UCR? Also, how can we best show our transformative experiences? So we do holistic review. We don't highlight any area. Holistic review is we look at the whole picture. You saw that when I put those 3 different students up, those are multiple different areas. We look at even more than that, but we want to know what the story is behind them. We want to know the story behind them. How can you best show your transformative experiences? In your personal statement. If you don't do anything other than start working on your personal statement a year, 2 years, 3 years in advance, I would strongly recommend that. The personal statement is extremely important because this gives you time to be in control of your story that you want to know, that you want the admissions committee to know about you. So that personal statement is really important. And I see a lot of students who don't spend time on their personal statements, or who try to be cute on their personal statements, who don't check their grammar on their personal statements. You should have a flawless personal statement. I often tell students that I am counseling to have their 5th grade cousin look at their personal statement. You know, someone who is in the 4th or 5th grade, because when we're reading all these applications, I'm staying up late at night and I'm reading something that's just making me fall asleep because it's so boring. It doesn't tell me anything. I always wanted to be a doctor. I love science. I love chemistry. That doesn't, we want to know who you are, what you're going to bring to the table, your passions, your challenges, who you are, what's your story. That's what we want to do. That's what keeps me up. I don't have to drink coffee to read that story. I don't have to say, oh, okay, boy, they're going to stop. We get excited by things like that. We discuss that in the room. People will fight for your application based on your story. So your story is important. Spend time on your story. Just like you spend time on your MCAT, spend time on your personal statement. That's really, really important. What's a good number of hours for clinical experience that we should have? Minimum 500. Minimum 500. How do you view publications? If you can do a publication, that is a big plus because it shows tenacity, resilience, understanding of the scientific literature. That's good. Is University of Riverside more of a research-based school or clinical? More clinical than research. We do have research in our undergraduate campus, but for the clinical, we are more clinical. For the medical school, we do have medical school research, but we do clinical more at this point in time. Later, it might be more research. Should I include my leadership experience from 5 years ago in my application? It depends. If your leadership experience was in clinical medicine and it wasn't in high school and it really was relevant, then you can include it. But I wouldn't do too much of that. It really, really has to be relevant. We're doing clinical hours at a hospital teaching foreign students English and doing research be a strength to my application? Absolutely. Absolutely, it would be. How does being a chiropractic assistant look on the application? It looks okay. It looks okay, but we also want you to do something in the traditional allopathic realm also. I've been volunteering at a hospital for over a year. What other kind of volunteer experience do you think I should do? Whatever experience that excites you. If it doesn't have to be clinical, it could be, you could do phlebotomy. You could be an EMT. There are some things that you can do with short certificates that help you get your clinical experience in, and you get to, actually be very active with the patient. Those are very, very popular. COPE definitely counts as clinical. It is definitely clinical, and leadership in COPE is leadership. We're creating a project in inland Southern California and implementing it, strengthening your application, and shadowing. Shadowing shows how and applies to you personally.
I want to make a plug. We had a presentation that talked about clinical experience where you could do 30 hours and get a certificate, because you can't walk into a hospital clinic and touch patients without certification. So there was examples in there about scribing, being a doula. So it's a 2-hour presentation, so we can't run it here, but you put it in the chat, people could look at it.
Yeah, there are multiple different ways. If you can't get into a doctor's office, there are multiple different ways to be around patients or sick people, and you should take advantage of that and make a little money on the side. You can do that. That would be great.
Yeah, doulas make like $800 of delivery. So I mean, yeah, that's pretty good money.
Right. And it shows resilience too, that because we know it's hard to get shadowing opportunities, but if you do something different and show that this is not going to stop me, it shows passion. We like that. May you please share your interest in an MPH program? What questions did you, what happened? I don't know what happened there.
It's a poll question that popped up, sorry.
Okay, what questions did you ask yourself before deciding to apply for an MPH? So my interest in the MPH program was because I was already a practicing physician, and I saw, I was in a private practice, but we had a contract with a drug rehabilitation center. And most of my patients were Caucasian in the private practice, and the patients from the rehab center were underrepresented in medicine. And they had HIV or hepatitis. And I was surprised to see that it was disproportionately people who were underrepresented in medicine. So I decided to get an MPH to see what I could do to try to prevent and educate and study why this was happening, because all of the news at that time, it was early on, was showing that everyone who was the face of HIV and AIDS was a white male. And that was not what I was seeing in my practice. So I wanted to, learn more. The curiosity in me made me want to go back to to MPH school, to get more of a public health band to my education. And I'm very grateful for it. And I'm very glad that I did, although it was harder for me than medical school, to tell you the truth. How should students prepare for UCR School of Medicine interview questions? So we do the MMI. So I would say that you just practice with your healthcare team, your not the healthcare team, what is your health professional advisors. Practice with friends. You can look on YouTube, but we do MMIs. And I think most medical schools now do MMIs or mini medical interviews. So you need to learn how to be concise, short answers, straight to the point, look in the eyes of the people, be grateful, thankful, gracious, and make sure that you answer the question. Answer the question. So listen and practice being concise in your answers and being able to go further if there are prompts. If we did a cadaver lab in high school, can we count that? No, unfortunately not. What's the biggest mistake that applicants make in their personal statement? Not being personal, just telling us about their CV. That's a wasted opportunity. When submitting our experiences, what type of information will we need to submit to verify experiences? The MCAS application will help you to do that, to verify your experiences. We can tell if someone is, some people we spent 100,000 hours on this, or, they have so many different, we look at after you do this so many times, you can tell if something doesn't make sense, or if you don't have letters to support those experiences. If you have something that you think is a major experience for you and you don't have a letter of recommendation to back up that, that's not a good thing. That's a black eye on your application. There's been a behavioral therapist for children with autism spectrum disease, and other neurological disorders count as a clinical experience. Yes, it can count as a clinical experience. We're getting multiple letters of recommendation from doctors I directly work with, and clinical instructors improve the quality of my letters of recommendation, especially if we share similar stories with one another. So it depends, because it depends on what they write in your letters of recommendation. And, we don't necessarily need to have all 5 letters from doctors. We want some letters from, that attest to your academic career, some that attest to your clinical, some that attest to, we want to know about you all around as a full person. Again, just making sure that you represent who you are in a fully dimensional way. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Let's go on to the presentation. I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I've had there anyway. So we talked about why the reality is there are a lot of students who are applying for medical school. A lot of students, 60,000 applying for a few number of seats. Nationally, 60,000 students, 22,000 students got in. So your chances of getting into medical school used to be 50%. Now it's about 36%. 36% of students who apply get in. So it's becoming much more competitive. And most students only get about 3 interviews on average. It's hard, especially in California. California is even more difficult than not. And it costs a lot to apply to medical school. First, you have to apply for the MCAT. That's $320. Then you have to apply for the MCAT service. Each medical school, when you do the secondary application. So it is very expensive to apply to medical school. So you want to put your best foot forward when you're applying for medical schools, and especially medical schools in the United States. You definitely want to put your best foot forward so that you don't waste your money. Talk to someone about your application before you submit it. Okay, so I want to give you the keys to unlock the door to get into medical school. So you're asking the questions, you're definitely asking the questions, but the biggest point is failing to prepare means that you're preparing to fail. Translation, if you don't do your best in setting this application, writing your personal statement, studying for the MCAT, doing your best on your GPA, talking to as many people as you can talk to about the application, reaching out, not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to look silly. There are no bad questions, but people say, I'm not going to ask that question. If you don't ask, you don't know. An empty mouth, a closed mouth does not get fed. You need to prepare. Look on, aspiringdocs.com. There are, if you don't have a health advisor, there is a national health advising website that you can contact. Reach out to people, ask questions, reach out, ask, show that resilience, show that perseverance. Failing to prepare means that you're preparing to fail, and the stakes are just too high. You put too much time and too much effort into getting into medical school or to trying to get into medical school. Know the dates. Know the date when the MCAS application opens up. Know the date when the MCAS application closes. Know how many times you can take the MCAT. Know when the MCATs, when the last day is you can take the MCAT before you can get the score to prepare for medical school. Make sure that you have your the date for the secondary application deadline, because a medical school, you can have everything done except your secondary application. You're not going to get looked at. You just wasted your money. So prepare, ask questions, knowing what you need to do by getting all of the information, keeping it organized and checking it. Asking questions is really, really, really important. The timeline. If I were you and I was going to medical school, part of that preparation is having a timeline. You need to start out, working backwards from when the date for a medical school application can be submitted. Typically, that's in around June. So if you know that the medical school application is going to be submitted in June, then you need to take your MCAT and you need to start preparing for the MCAT the year before the year that you are interviewing. At the very latest, very latest, May of the year in which you are interviewing or applying to medical school, because you need to have about a month. And it depends on how many students are taking the MCAT at that time. You need to have about a month for the scores to come back. So in January, you should be doing things like, studying for your MCAT, or continuing studying for your MCAT, because you've been studying in undergraduate school, getting those good grades, but you want to have a schedule on how to study. Take those tests, make sure you take lots and lots of practice questions, sit down and actually simulate the 8-hour test that you're going to do when you're studying for the MCAT. Know what's in the MCAT. You know the 4 different sections. You do the timing, read, because the CARS section, or the critical analysis section, requires that you understand that you read, how fast you read, how much you understand what you read, how much you process that. So it's not, you can do really well in biology and chemistry and math and not do well in CARS. So we want you to do well in all of it, but you have to prepare for that. So sit down, physically write a timeline for what you're going to do. And the most important in the first part of the year, in the spring, is to study for the MCAT, prepare to take it, start, looking at the different medical schools that you're interested in and what their different missions are and what they really admire and put forward for their students, what their students' average GPA is, their average MCAT. See if you are competitive for that school, and if you are going to be a good fit for that school. Then later in the year, you want to start working on your personal statement, because the personal statement is really important. Now, that being said, I hope that you start working on your MCAT and your personal statement the year before, because you want to get that to a point that you refine it once you get to your calendar. But write it down. Don't just think it in your head, write it down. You have to put a little time in there to practice for the MMI and the outer suite. Now we have Casper. We don't at UCR, but many medical schools do, where you have the videotaped interviews. So you want to know what each school is asking, and you want to be prepared for it, so that when the time comes for the applications to be rolled out, you're going to be right there in the fray, and you'll be right there ready to be competitive and not come in later. So that's really important. We talked about the preparation, January through April. That's really, really important, because May is typically when the season opens. So you want to be ready for that. MCAT. Now, I know you all know about the MCAT. You know how long it takes. You know the different sections: biology, chemistry, psychology, and the CARs. You need to familiarize yourself with that. The scores go from 472 to 528. You want to, the median score is 500. You want to at least be at that 500 or above. You want to study like you study for the MCAT, like you're studying for, like you're going to work, like you're studying for a job. So you really, really, really need to study minimum dedicated 4 months for that MCAT. Prepare for it. Don't just take it. I see a lot of students who say, I'm going to take the MCAT to see where I am. No. It is a test that you want to prepare for and be psychologically prepared for, not just in content, but in the ability to just sit there and to go over question after question after question after question. That's really, really important.
You actually what you just stated, you see that a lot in the chats. They say, oh, we'll just take the MCAT for practice. And there's practice exams that you could do actually for free. And there's some that you could pay too.
Exactly. Yep. And I'm glad you put that NAAHP Finder Advisor, because I was going to talk about that. So I'm glad you did put that in. It's not really expensive. And you can get free MCAT preparation materials from the AAMC. Definitely to get that. And they do give you a long test. I would save that towards the end. Not take it in the beginning, take it after you've been practicing for a while. Use Khan Academy. There are lots of free resources. And let me tell you, you can write to Kaplan. You can write to Kaplan and say, look, I am poor. I have no money. This is my story. Can you give me a free prep test or prep class, of course? What if they can't? What if they don't? So what? What have you missed? You miss how much stamps, or I don't know, or email. Ask. Let them tell you no. And do not be hurt if somebody tells you no. Keep asking, because it ultimately helps you. Right?
Trinity, who's right next to you, she did the whole presentation on studying for the MCAT on her own, and she, I think, got in the 99th percentile.
Wow, congratulations, Trinity. Congratulations. And
thank you. There is no magic secret. You have to study a lot.
Well, right. That's the magic secret. Studying, preparing is really, really, really important. Is there anything that you would suggest that students should highlight in their secondary applications? So the schools control the secondary application. The schools will tell you what they think are very important in the questions. Answer the questions. If the school asks you, what values do you do? Don't go and talk about, going skiing on the mountains. Talk about the values. The schools are directing you as to what is important to them. So answer those questions. So it's not anything that you can prepare for. You have to, each one is individualized. And that's why it's important that you do your studying for the MCAT and your primary application in the spring of the year, January to April, so that when it's time for your applications that you've been accepted and you have to do your secondary applications, that takes a lot of time. Students don't realize how much time it takes to do secondary applications because each one is individualized for the medical school that you are applying to. So you have to spend some time on those, and they have to be very specific. If you cut and paste what you put in the primary application on the secondary application, is not a good thing. Is not a good thing. So we want very intentional, very targeted information in the secondary application. If you've applied before, can you reuse the previous letters of recommendation? Does that hurt your application? You can reuse the previous letters, but really important is that you get the dates updated. Do not submit a letter of recommendation that is old or stale. That is not a good thing. Do not. Get someone to update it. Even if all they do is update the date, it shows relevancy. We want recency. We want to see an updated letter. What if I'm unable to get a letter of recommendation from a very impactful experience due to a toxic work environment? Should I leave it off my application? Now, Scarlett, that's a very, very, very difficult question to answer. No one can get you a letter from that. I mean, I understand it's a toxic work environment, but someone in that environment should be able to attest to how much you've worked, how much you've done, how much someone should be able to get you even a short letter of recommendation from that experience, if it is a major experience for you. Or if not, you need to find a different major experience. Now, we have had students get into medical school without letters of recommendation from their major experiences, but, it can't be all of them. It could, maybe you miss one, but don't miss more than that. But that's what we look for. If you spend a lot of time on an experience and you don't have a letter of recommendation, what would you think if you were in the admissions officer's seat? Did they not do well in this? Why is someone not giving them a letter of recommendation? We don't think that it's the toxic work environment. What are we thinking? We're going to think that it's something that you did, that made them not give you a letter of recommendation. So you don't want us to be thinking anything, right? You don't want us to be thinking that. So we really want you to try to get a letter of recommendation. And even someone can talk about, I doubt they will put it on paper that it was a toxic work environment, or you can talk about it a little bit. There is an area on every application that you can write others, like additional information. You don't want to go negative on that. You don't want to do anything negative. Another tip, do not write, things about people did malpractice on me or something like that. You want to stay as positive as possible when you're doing a medical school application or a residency application or whatever. You don't want to go, when they go low, we go high. You want to stay high and positive in your medical school application. All right. Any advice on getting letters of recommendation from science professors who you haven't mistakenly kept contact with as a college graduate? That's going to be hard. That's going to be real hard. Because if you haven't kept touch with them, that's going to be hard. Try to get something more recent, because when you're submitting a letter of recommendation, you want them to know you and to know you well. You don't want someone that says they scored an A in my class and that's all they really know about you. We see on the transcript that you got an A in the class. We want them to tell us that you went above and beyond. You were helpful with the students in the class. You came to office hours and you were curious about the material. You you were invested in the course. So someone who has that relationship with you. If you've been out of medical school for a few years, and let me tell you, we like students who do gap years, because you have a chance to be mature and to show growth and development, and that's really important. So we realize that sometimes you're going to be away from your professors. So ask for a letter early on and hold it, keep it in like interfolio or whatever, and then go back to the professor and ask them to update that letter afterwards, because then they will remember that they wrote it already. So ask for the letter earlier rather than later. So if you miss that opportunity, then what I would suggest is to try to get some more recent letters, because the professor letters are okay, but you're going to get letters from other people too, who know you and can attest to the work that you've done clinically with them recently. If you have a ton of relevant clinical experience in volunteering, but don't do that well in the MCAT, how can you speak to that or show that you're a great candidate for that in your application? So if you didn't do that well in the MCAT, my suggestion would be that you study hard, you hunker down, and you take the MCAT again. But if it's an okay MCAT, and you have a ton of relevant clinical experience and volunteering, then you can go ahead and submit that application and say, I was working, I was doing this, my time was split, and this is why my application was like that. But if it's really low, I wouldn't submit the application, because many schools do have a cutoff, and your application, you spend all that money and it's not going to be looked at. So if you didn't do well, look at the profile of the school that you would like to apply to, of the schools that you're applying to, and look at their average MCAT score. If you see that you're way off, I wouldn't waste your money. It's a lot of time and money to submit an application. Make a phone call to the admissions person at the school, the admissions director or the admissions coordinator, and talk to them about your application before you put it in. Again, prepare. Failing to prepare means preparing to fail. Ask questions, ask lots of questions. All people can tell you is no. You still are further in your course than not if you ask and you get a negative answer, right? How do you recommend to keep in touch with a professor? Yes, I definitely recommend keeping in touch with the professor after finishing the class if you're asking for a letter of recommendation, or even if you've had them write the letter once a year, go back and say, hi, this is what I'm doing. Students would send me emails all the time saying, hi, Dr. Simmons, I just want you to know that I'm doing this now, saying hi, doing this, doing well, blah, blah, blah. So then I would say, oh, Angela, oh, Jamal, oh, Emma, so good to see you. They become, they stay to the front of my mind, and that's really, really important.
I would say if you're on campus, their office hours are posted online, or even just drop by. It's 10 minutes, 15 minutes of your time, but
absolutely,
it's worth getting into medical school if you want them to write you a good letter. So you just have to make that priority.
Absolutely, yeah. What is the culture like at UCR in regards to non-traditional students? I would hope that it's a good culture in regards to non-traditional students. We have lots of traditional students. As I said, we do holistic review, and we take that really, really seriously. We have students who, we don't want our students to look the same. We don't want our students to think the same. We don't want our students to act the same, because our patients the residents of inland Southern California are not the same. So we want students who learn from each other, and we do lots of active learning in group settings so that our students can learn from each other, because that's what makes an excellent physician, is one who can talk to any patient or understand the different cultures of any patient who comes through that door. That's what makes an excellent doctor. So we want students who are quote unquote traditional and non-traditional. So we want to have an environment that is totally welcoming and inclusive for anyone. I hope that answers your question. As a pre-med student at UCR, am I able to ask someone from UCR Medical School to review my application? No, because that's unfair, but we do have HPAC, and we do have sessions where we talk to students. So we can't review your whole application, but we can give you feedback on different components of the application. And part of what we do at UCR is to try to help our students. We have a program called the HIDER program, where we set aside, of those 80 seats that we have, we set aside 24 of those seats, a minimum of 24, just for students who come from UCR. So that's a big advantage. And those 24 seats, we typically get about 150 applications from UCR for 24 seats. So I would rather be in at 24 seats for 150 versus the other seats for the 6,000 applications. So UCR gives you a distinct advantage as long as you do 6 quarters at UCR. You can't just come in at the last minute and be considered a HIDER scholar. You have to, we love community college students. As a matter of fact, Cal State San Bernardino, we actually, I'm proud to say, amongst the UCs, we do the best in accepting community college students as well as Cal State students, because we do holistic review. We do holistic review, and we will, we have partnerships with community colleges where we will come out and talk to you. We want to help prepare, because we know that many students don't have the advantages that people who have family members who've gone to college and gone through medical school, and personally, me, my father had a second grade education. My mother went to high school, but I knew nothing when I was preparing for medical school. So I make it my mission to help others who didn't have those advantages to get into medical school. That's really, really, really important to me. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm in the position that I am in, to help more students to get into medical school so that they can be good doctors, so that they can improve the health and get rid of these health disparities that are killing my families, your families. Is really personal to me.
And that's why she's here on a Friday afternoon, evening.
For sure. But it is really personal. And I know that I'm not the only one. So that's why I say, and if you don't hear anything else that I say tonight, prepare, ask questions. Now, we can't help every single person. It's just not enough hours in a day, but someone will. And you have to be willing to put yourself out there and ask questions and be told no. I've been told no my whole life, but I don't care. You tell me no, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to keep going until I can get the answer. Otherwise, I never would be where I am right now. It was totally worth it. I don't take it personally. I know that everyone, there just aren't enough spots. Ask, prepare. Keep coming back. Can I talk about UCR's early assurance program? Absolutely. So in order to be in the early assurance program, you have to be part of UCR, and we allow students to come into medical school before they graduate. Well, they don't come, they get accepted into medical school before they graduate. So if you do really well academically in undergraduate, if you do really well and you volunteer and we see that you're off to a really, really, really good start, then we don't want you to leave UCR. We want you to stay here at UCR. So we take the MCAT off the table. We don't make you take an MCAT, and we will accept you in the medical school, and you'll come in either the next year or the following year thereafter. You do not have to take an MCAT. So it's an early assurance. That means that you don't have to, do all these interviews, do all these applications, study for the MCAT, everything that we were talking about. You don't have to do that because you have already gotten accepted into medical school. It's a wonderful program. We have been doing it for about 5 years, and we accept about 12 students per year. Each year it gets more and more and more competitive. It really does, but it's a wonderful program. What percentage of UCR admitted students come from underrepresented minorities and or Latinx? We anywhere from 40 to 50%. This year it was right at 40%. We've been high as 50%. So we're very proud of our statistics, and we only could do that if we would, because as you know, Prop 209 does not allow us to pick students based on race or ethnicity or gender. We cannot. We would lose our medical school license if we did that. So we look at surrogate markers, like what I was talking about, resilience. We look at your personal statement, because that many people who come from underrepresented backgrounds have lots of challenges that they have to go through. That's why your story is so, so, so important. With the new education school, will there be an increased number of students accepted in the year 2023? So we are very happy that our new school will be open next year. We are not going to be able to increase our class size right when it opens, because it's new. The years thereafter we will. So we plan to go up to 125 students per year, but we will slowly increase that. We will not do it all at once. We just to be transparent, we can accept 80 students per year. Last year we accepted 81. The year before that we accepted 87. So sometimes we overshoot that number, and I'm happy to overshoot that number, as long as I don't get fired for overshooting it too much. But it's just hard to turn, as you saw, it's hard to be an admissions committee member or head of the admissions committee, because there are so many wonderful students out there. So it is up to you to show us why you are the right person to be at UCR School of Medicine by preparing, making your application look great, and then having that personal statement and those letters of recommendation to round it out so that we can pick students who really want to help others. And that's what we're about. That's our mission, to help our area. And as long as you're on board with that mission, then you're a friend of UCR School of Medicine. So I think that was my last slide, but at any rate, even if it isn't, I think we're at the end of the day. I'm sorry if I didn't want to do a lot of the talking. I wanted you guys to do most of the talking, but if you have any questions, that's my email address. Feel free to email me and I will get back to you. Maybe not immediately, but I will get back in touch with you. I wish the very best for each and every last one of you. And I really hope that if there's anything that we can do to help, that you will reach out to us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more last questions, do we? I don't see any.
Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you again for coming tonight.